afternoon, everyone. My name's Richard Fijo. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome you to webinar 1, Search for Top End Stock. And I'd like to, this is a webinar from POSH SANNT that aims to explore the qualities doctors need so they can best serve the community in the Northern Territory. POSH SANNT have developed this webinar series to start constructive and deep conversations about health, leadership, and to draw out insights from a broad range of people about what health leadership is about. The session will be recorded, and we encourage you to share it with others afterwards so that we can grow the conversation around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health leadership. We really want to we want this to be a valuable conversation, so please put your questions to our panelists in the Q&A, and we'll pick up on as many possible during the webinar. So the other thing I'd like to do is take the opportunity to acknowledge all traditional owners and custodians in the lands that we work on and live across. And I'd like to start by welcoming you to Larrakia land here in Darwin, Northern Territory. Arnie Pat is an elder on campus in Alice Springs, and I'd like, she's an apology today, so I'd like to acknowledge her. And I'd also like to acknowledge Uncle Lewis O'Brien, who is our elder in residence in Adelaide, and acknowledge Professor Tom Kalmar, who is the patron of POSH Centres. So now I'd like to start by introducing our panel. Dr. Justin Kane is a Gamilaroi and Ewan man who is a vascular surgeon, a registrar at Royal Darwin Hospital. Sean Taylor will be joining us. He's the Executive Director of Aboriginal Health in the Top End Health Service. And Dr. Alida Fijo, the first Aboriginal person from the Northern Territory to become a medical student and a highly experienced GP, currently working in Nhulunbuy. You can see Tim Winkler there. He's going to help me host the session and keep time. So first I'd like to play you an interview with that Alida recorded earlier, just to kick off with some questions for our panel. Over to you, Tim. How you going, Alida? This is Dr. Alida Fijo with us today for a pre-interview on our webinar. So the webinar is to celebrate some of our Aboriginal medical students coming through Flinders University. And part of this webinar, it's a series, and we want to celebrate particularly the Aboriginal medical students coming through and give them and yourself a bit of recognition for your achievements. So what I might do to start off with is I want to just ask you a few casual questions, beginning with, in your view, what do you think a great NT doctor needs in regards to skills and knowledge?
Okay. In terms of skills and knowledge, I think you do need to have your basic medical knowledge, some basic skills there. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. As long as you know how to find the answers, that's okay. Nobody knows everything. I think also what you do need to do is to be able to communicate with your patient, able to be able to communicate with your patient very, very well. And so know the demographics of the Northern Territory. Here, you know, we've got a lot of young people, we've got a lot of mixed cultures, we've got a lot of Aboriginal people, we've got people who have families interstate, but also families off in different communities. That's important to know. I think it's important to know for that doctor about themselves. They have to ask themselves truly and deeply whether they're racist, whether they have those racist views. I'm actually passionate about improving Aboriginal health. So I think that the best doctor to be, you know, in the Territory is the one who is not racist, who can communicate. So have to have a knowledge of the social and historical aspects of where the patient has come from to bring that patient in to see you today. To be able to communicate well with that patient, knowing the difficulties and barriers that patient has to overcome in order to get the best health that we can provide. And I think the best doctor is the one that can recognise and understand, communicate those, and to try to be the healer, not just a doctor, but to be the healer and to help bridge that gap to enable that patient to get the best that Western medicine has to offer.
Okay, that's a great answer. And I hear you say healer there. So with that in mind, in your view, what does the best anti-medical program for the future look like?
Well, I would love to see really Territorian doctors. We need to have doctors from the Northern Territory. And this is where, I mean, you know, people have been talking around, we need to grow our own. Yes, but we need to, a doctor is not just going to come through by themselves. It requires a whole family support and a whole community support, but particularly family. And those new doctors that we're having come through, I think that they need to be identified in primary school and nurtured and supported all along the way to say, this is the pathway that you need, and the families, this is the pathway that your child needs to get your child into the right place to be a doctor. Okay. And so the best doctor is somebody really who grew up here, who knows the people, who knows the culture, is one of the community. Now, that's a great thing, because that person will call the territory home. And that place really is the home. And so the people are of value. Our people, our Territorians, are of value to that doctor. And it's their priority, because they are one of us and we are one of them.
Yeah, I get that. That's really important, because not only is growing our own part of that thing, but also keeping doctors in the territory. Because, I've got no doubt what you're saying is absolutely true. It's more likely that people are going to actually stay in the territory if they're from the territory, aren't they?
That's right. That's right, because they'll have family, extended family, hopefully partners, raise children, and we turn it into a generational thing. And then we're not going to lose them.
Okay, thank you again. That's a great answer. Keeping that in mind, how would you then think about how do we train non-Indigenous doctors to work best across Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities?
They need to spend time in Aboriginal communities. They need to have a lot of Aboriginal cultural education from basically from day one that they enter medical school. They have to do that. They have to be fully immersed in Aboriginal experience, knowledge, culture. It's not to be an us or them, Aboriginal doctors and non-Aboriginal doctor groups. No, it has to be blended, and that's why I say if they come from here, that process has already happened, because they've grown up with Aboriginal people. Their neighbours may be Aboriginal, their friends and their families. Okay, so we just take that one step further and give them the education that they would not have received at school, the cultural, historical, the social perspectives, while they come along in medical school. This is not just for our students, but for all of the medical students, because they may come this way one day. And then have at every single year a time and a placement in an Aboriginal medical service or in a community, and have the follow-up, so that while they're away, they have an opportunity to ask someone questions, ask the cultural educator, why does this person do that or that? Why is this situation? so that they can be given the education and get the correct answers, so that they're not making assumptions, they're not building up racist assumptions at all, but they're getting the truth. And that will endear them. The time that they spend in the communities, the time they spend with Aboriginal people will endear them. They will make friends, they will have love. And when you have love for your patient, that's when you become the best doctor. You have
Great
to
answer.
love your people to be the best doctor.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that people from the territory already being immersed in the Territorian lifestyle would already carry that kind of, values and mindset with them. But if they went to the community, what else can be done to support their education and learning?
Well, so they can be adopted within a family. They can be, yes, apart from just showing sites, if they are adopted with that community, the community actually has mentors from within the community. So, because every community is different, if they've got mentors from the community that they can ask for advice from, as well as, people like, for example, you sitting on the outside at the university, here's more resources, more places that they can go and have their questions answered. Mm.
So you would encourage the students to seek answers?
Yeah, because it's not enough. It's not enough to have just cultural orientation where they go, oh, this is the place, this is the language, this is what it looks like. No, you must go. That's too superficial. It does not give meaning to the real problem. And the real issue is when your patient is sitting in front of you, you need to know your patient and understand where that patient's coming from. All of those other things are just superficials. We need to get our students to come deeper, much deeper, to have a better understanding of where their patients are from, not in terms of location, but in terms of history and social position and experiences and knowledge, so that we can understand. For example, if they say no, as an example, no, I don't want to have the needle. Well, we already have a bit of an idea of, well, why is that? Can you tell me about that? What's your reason? And then we can explore that with a bit of an understanding from our perspective, so that we can explain the reasons why we want them to have a particular injection.
Well, these are great answers. Do you have anything to add, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Richie. Later, I read that you were the first Aboriginal medical student from the NT. Is that right?
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, and given that you've had all that experience, what have you seen that should change, that would make training better, and not just training, but life for the young GP or the young medical student who emerges? What help do they need?
Well, we've come a long way since a long way. Simply the fact that we've got Flinders building here. I had to pack up and take my children down to Adelaide and then come back. And so we've sorted that out. This is great. We need to have that here from the beginning. Other things that they will need, I think, look, obviously finances, big thing, family support. But I also know that you've got Flinders in all the regional towns as well as Darwin, which is great, because the student may not come from Darwin. Ideally, I would want all of our students just to come from the Northern Territory. That's my view. But we need to engage more in their families. Their families need to be part of the journey, big time. We have to take away that Western idea of the individual, I think, because Darwin, I don't believe, is not really the individual. it's still very much a community. And so if we can engage their family and have regular support meetings with the family, how are you going to the student, and parents, how do you think your son or your daughter's going, or wife or husband? And then you can ask them, involve them. There's no reason why we can't. We just say, hey, we're going to do it this way. And then you do it that way, and then the answers will come up. Oh, this person seems to be struggling with this and that. Well, you know what? Once you know that there's a struggle somewhere, well, you can get onto that and help find solutions to that problem, which in turn supports that student to get through. So it has to be not an individual, it has to be a family and community support. I think that's probably the biggest way. I think we've ticked a lot of boxes, but I think this box can be even further. And so if you then start identifying those children in primary school, those really smart ones, and flag it with their parents, hey, you've got a really smart kid here. Do you want to be a doctor? Do you want your child to be a doctor? And this is what you need to do, and nurture it all the way through primary school, high school, and then when they're at medical school, guess what? You've already developed a rapport with the family, the significant people in that person's life who will give the most support. That's what you need to get that student over the line. Yeah. And then if you say, well, you do want this person to go out into communities and whatever, great. You've developed that rapport, so you can work around things like, maybe location where there's family, or where maybe children can be taken at the same time, or can something be done to be able to take a family. Like when I went out on my rotation, I had to leave my family at home, husband and children, for 6 weeks. Could there have been a way to actually take my children with me? Don't know. But maybe that's a question that you need to ask.
Well, it's always going forward, and you're right, we have come a long way, and we've still got a lot to go into the future. Hopefully this will be part of it, making a better future.
So Richie, you're just muted at the moment.
Okay, is that better? Okay.
Much better. Yep.
That was a pre-recording by Dr. Alida Fijo. That's why no one could talk or thing, because it was actually a pre-recording. She's actually out in Gove now doing some locum work. And as this is our first webinar, of course, we're going to have some technical issues. So now we've actually been joined by I've got to get this right, our Executive Dean from the College of Medicine and Public Health, Mr. Jonathan Craig. Just before I talk with Justin, would you like to say a few words, Jonathan?
All I want to say is that this is fabulous. So, in a couple of reasons. So, it's great to listen to Alita. I've never met her. I've read her book. Her book was inspirational and very informative. So, why wouldn't I want to engage with a group of people who are on this call that I can learn so much from? So I'm really here just to learn and listen as much as able. I'm also here to indicate that from a college and a university level, this is so important to all of our business. It's not, our priority is for, as Alita mentioned, developing a fit for purpose workforce, to increasing the number and strength of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander graduates. That is as important as anything else in the college, but also ensure that our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people impact the entire college business. So it's not just around improving outcomes for Aboriginal people, but it's actually about ensuring that all of our work aligns with what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities think is so critical. So I'm just looking forward to this opportunity, Uncle Richie, just to listen and learn from you all. Thank you for putting it on.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And yeah, just to refresh a bit what Alida was talking about is, you know, it was her opinion that came across that she says, well, the best possible way in Dr. Alida Fijo's opinion for Aboriginal health to go forward is to grow our own. But however, in saying that, when we're unable to grow our own, I suppose the next best thing is having other Aboriginal people work with Aboriginal people, because as Aboriginal people, we're able to relate to each other. We share that place that we come from, and we're able to communicate. And some of the things that Dr. Alida raises. And so with this in mind, I'd like to now just maybe ask Justin a couple of questions, starting with Justin, what inspired you to become a doctor? What was your reaction to Alida's comments? And I'm curious, how early did you start? When did you decide that you wanted to be a doctor?
Thanks, Uncle Rich. And again, like, it's a pleasure to be a part of this panel. I really enjoy having good yarns with other mob, and to hopefully encourage other people on the line to think about pursuing a medical career. So for me, I guess I started thinking about doing medicine at a very young age, in my teenage years. So probably in about year 10 or year 11, I first had the idea of wanting to study medicine. But, you know, typical like Koori kid, and by Koori I mean like Aboriginal person from down South Coast, New South Wales. Typical Koori kid, didn't really get the marks at school to get straight into med school, wasn't really aware of processes of getting into university or alternative pathways or supportive pathways. And so so I ended up doing another degree first, and then when I finished that, that's when I thought about applying for medical school. So I did it as a postgraduate, so I took a little bit of a roundabout way to get there, but I'm here now, and it's been great. A couple of my distant cousins from New South Wales were a handful of the first Aboriginal doctors in the country, and so having them around motivating me was very important. So yeah, having them around was very important and helped push me and motivate me to pursue medicine and to keep on top of my science knowledge. And then, you know, I got into medical school, and for me, my family, my dad's family is from the south coast of New South Wales, and so I went to medical school there. And for me, having the support network of friends who were in the medical school, knowing the local Aboriginal community, knowing the local medical community, all of those things were very important in me finishing medical school and becoming a doctor, and were motivating things.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And like, that's really it. It was just something that sort of there wasn't like a sort of pivotal moment. It was just something that I thought about, and it just sort of stuck in my mind for a long time. And then once I started finishing my undergraduate degree was when I sort of started enacting those plans to pursue medicine.
So can I ask, how long have you been in the Northern Territory? And since you've been here, what do you think, in your view, are the skills and knowledges and attitudes that a great NT doctor needs? We heard from Alida earlier.
Yeah. So I moved to the Territory in January this year. So I've been working as a doctor here for 8 months. I, like, you know, Uncle Rich, I absolutely love it here in Darwin. I love living up here. I feel like I've just been like a duck to water, and I feel like I've found my place in the world. So, you know, like tropical weather, beautiful scenery, nice people, good mob around. You know, I quite love it up here. I feel like I'm an honorary Territorian now. But for being a doctor here, one thing that I've seen is coming from Sydney, because my first few years of training, I've been in Sydney. In the big metropolitan centres, you find that people become really super specialised. And so they narrow their skills and their abilities to only a handful of procedures. So I work as a surgical registrar, and I specialize in vascular surgery. And so some parts of metropolitan cities and hospitals, those surgeons and registrars really hone skills in certain areas. Up here in Darwin, I think you need to have a broad skill set. And similar to what Dr. Fijo was saying in her video about having a good solid foundation is important, but also keeping the breadth of skill to be able to face any sort of clinical situation, because, you know, here at Royal Darwin, I feel like anything can walk in the door, and the different sort of either different diseases or different pathological processes vary significantly. And so you've got to be able to cope with like the spectrum of those things rather than honing in. So I think having good broad skills and a good foundation in surgical knowledge is important. And I think that's probably that in combination with communication, which is what Alida was talking about. And I just can't emphasize that enough. And you see, I feel like I've recognized my own privilege coming here, working with a large proportion of Aboriginal patients. And for me, being an Aboriginal man, it's easier for me to communicate with Aboriginal patients at a cultural level, as opposed to having a non-Indigenous doctor sort of come in with a preconceived idea of what healthcare is and a communication style that essentially intimidates a patient. And so I feel like by proxy, the junior doctors and people who have been in my orbit, who have worked with me, have seen the way I've communicated with patients and have therefore changed their communication styles. So I think you have to be a good doctor. You have to have good bread and butter skills and a good foundation in clinical knowledge. And then also you have to be an excellent communicator. And on top of that, and then the third thing is being aware of not only your own culture and like what Alida, so first of all, I agree with everything that Alida said. I don't think there's anything, like, I don't think I'm adding anything more, but I just think that I think that recognizing your own values and principles and your own culture and recognizing how that impacts the way you communicate with not just patients at work, but any human being in general is an important part of the process. And so then bringing yourself down to a level to be able to communicate with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander patients, or any patient for that matter, is important. So having that humility, having communication skills, and having really good foundation skills, clinical foundation skills, is what is important for doctors in the Territory.
Okay, that's really, really good feedback. And based on what you said, I'll then ask you, in your opinion, what does the best Northern Territory program for the future look like?
So in the future, look, again, I'm going to say exactly what Alida said. I feel like Alida has said everything that I was going to say. I think there is merit here in the Territory of growing Territorian doctors. There's lots and lots of evidence, not just from the Territory, but of other places in the country where where doctors or people who are from rural areas or from remote areas, they're more likely to go back and work there as doctors when they finish their training. So if you apply that principle to here in the Territory, and if you invest in young people from right through the whole training pipeline, from, like what Alida was saying, preschool to primary school to high school, to university, and then to medical school, if you invest in the long-term future of the Territory, then you're going to attract Territorian young people to become doctors here. And I've seen that in my practice here. I've had a handful of junior doctors who have come through the NT program, who are from the Territory, and, you know, like, surprised, they're back here working as junior doctors. And although they recognize that they have to leave to train, they still want to come back when they finish their training, which is valuable. And so exactly what Alida said, investing in young people, valuing early education, promoting local Territorians and local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to come into to pursue any sort of academic career and medical career is important, because I feel like the Territory, since I've been here, I feel really strongly about the Territory, and seeing the health inequities here and some of the a lot of sort of, I don't want to say lack of resources, but it's definitely not as resourced as other metropolitan centres that I've worked in. I feel like the Territory, similar to what, again, I'm just saying everything that Alida said, you know, people of the Territory should be valued more in Australia. And I feel like the Territory deserves the best doctors, the best healthcare system. And, you know, having either mob or non-Indigenous mob from Darwin or from the Territory come back to the Territory adds a layer of value. And I think patients of the Territory would respect that.
Okay, maybe I'll throw one more at you. As a person not originally from the Territory, how do we recruit the best Aboriginal talent like yourself? Because I know you got lots of love for the Territory. We're giving it straight back to you. But, how do we get more people who might be either Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal, but how do we bring them into the Territory? How do we keep them here?
Yeah, I think I'm lucky. There's a few Aboriginal doctors that work here, which has been one of the best things about working in the Territory, is that, you know, I've gone from somewhere where there's not many Aboriginal doctors working in a place to a whole heap. And so I think for me, a part of why I came here was to add a new layer to my cultural understanding as well. And I feel like in order to attract Aboriginal doctors here, I feel like not only making it an appealing job or an appealing clinical job for them, I think making it appealing in terms of, you know, being with mob, going to communities, immersing yourself as well, like meeting you, Uncle Richie, and, you know, I've met members of your family who have been very welcoming, and I think exploring the local communities and nearby regions, I think that's important, and selling the cultural side of the Territory is important for Aboriginal doctors, I feel. For non-Indigenous people, I think you can do that as well. I think cultural immersion is important, similar to what Alida was saying, was, you know, you can't just have this superficial orientation and expect that to be it. I think you need to, like, add a depth of knowledge by, you know, communicating with communities, being in communities, seeing what it's like on the ground in communities. I think that's important, and I think that's the selling point of the Territory. On top of that, you know, even though you can't swim in the beaches, it's still pretty to watch a sunset. Like, the territory's just got so much, like the culture here and the spirit of this area is like really quite strong. And I think that should also be a big selling point as well, rather than young people saying, oh, it's like the new Bali of Australia. I think that's just nonsense. I think that the vibrancy of the culture and the spirit of this area is what should attract people here.
Well, I gotta say, as a Larrakia man, I'm awfully happy to hear you say that. So what I might do, thank you for that. Hang around, Justin, because we might get some questions directed at you a little bit later. What I might do is I might turn my attention to Sean. Would you be able to tell us a bit about yourself and your background, please?
Yeah, hi Richard, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this. So my name is Sean Taylor. I originate from Murray Island and in the eastern part of the Torres Strait. It's where my professional career also began. I began as an Indigenous health worker. I saw many of the diabetes epidemics and how much poorly managed diabetes swept through the Torres Strait, and also the complications associated with diabetes, renal disease as one of them. And that led me on to go and study to many of the qualifications I have. So when I did nursing with James Cook University based on Thursday Island, then I went down to Adelaide with the Flinders University and studied a graduate certificate in diabetes management and education, and also did a honours degree, a Bachelor of Health Science and honours, looking at the association between health literacy and glycemic control. And I did a Doctor of Public Health at James Cook University, looking at the improvement of diabetes management and in care in rural and remote health clinics. So, and now I'm in the Northern Territory as the Executive Director for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health and Diversity, and also the Deputy Director for Indigenous Leadership and Engagement with Menzies School of Health Research.
Okay. Wow, that's impressive. What I'm going to do is I'll ask you, but I'm going to tweak this slightly. So what inspired you to follow your path?
When I was 18, as I walked into the Murray Island Primary Healthcare Centre, like I said, I saw how poorly managed diabetes, destroyed a population. And I knew this could have been all preventable. And, a lot of the preventable hospitalisation that we see today, it was all around good quality of care. And I followed that. And over time, I saw many of my community members, especially on Murray Island, they passed away. And as they passed away, that sort of made me go off and study, and I was eager to learn. I was more willing to try and make a difference, because I saw this with the naked eye. I seen patients froth up with toxicity with renal disease, and then flown to Cairns-based hospital and passed away, within a day. So it was these types of things that we saw, and that drove me all around Australia to look for knowledge. And I met a very intelligent and well-known man who's also on this screen, Jonathan Craig, in Sydney, and that's how I got into research. And I changed my focus on looking at research, and I went into obtain my own research credentials. So it was more that I turned the negative into a positive. So what I saw, I wanted to make a difference and help and improve, and not dwell on what I saw, but see better health outcomes for people in rural and remote communities.
Okay, I'm going to throw a question at you that I haven't asked this one. It's not too tricky, so don't stress. We do hear a lot about the cultural and social determinants of health. All the things that help determine whether we get sick or not, from whether we eat properly to whether we have enough money in the family to being able to live in a nice, clean house. Do you think that people understand the cultural and social determinants of health, and how we educate the broader community about the impact or influence of social determinants, and what impact that has on care and treatment?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I do think, and I do strongly believe that many of our patients and many of the people in communities understand, they're aware of some of the issues that's happening in their communities. What the issues, and this is the thing that I've learned, especially in my own research, is the why. Why does this happen? How do we fix it? It's such a big problem. What do we do? You know, the solutions are in the communities, and they know that. They know the answers to the solutions, but how do they address it is what, and you know, what resources do they have to be able to address the issues that they have? They know alcohol is one. We know that. You know, we hear the ladies and the elders talking about it, but do the resources are there to drive that? Employment. You know, many of these communities don't have, you know, adequate employment in there. So the boredom goes and it turns to other, you know, the drugs and the alcohol. So, you know, these issues, you know, people, it's just a matter of, you know, when we look at the social determinants of health and how do we understand, and, you know, do we have the correct governance within these communities? Because previously and historically, we did have our good governance, and you know, the males had their place in society, women had their place in society. There is a lot of other cultural influences that comes into play, and you know, some communities are very strong and some aren't. So it's not a uniform distribution across all of the communities across Australia, and especially within the Northern Territory, because the Northern Territory has a lot of, you know, Aboriginal groups, and you know, people have their own you know, their own governance structures. So it's we have to go back into the communities and ask the communities. And I'm hearing it through my own work. You know, we can consult, but it's about time now we make the actions. So going back to your original question, I do think people do understand is the why, and why is this happening to us? Why are we getting so much renal disease in our communities? Why are we getting so much diabetes in our community? Why are we getting this? And why am I taking this medication? Why am I?
Yeah, no, it's legitimate.
It's the why behind the why.
Yeah, and so based on that, what do you think? How do we bridge that gap to educating the community to create better health? Do we need more? Do we generate more doctors, or do we need more people doing education seminars in the communities, or how do we get across to improve that health?
I go back to Justin's point. I mean, I missed the first presentation, but I do go back to Justin's point. So, you know, around, you know, when we look at, you know, the medical school, you know, you needed the medical school here in the Northern Territory to be able to drive the issues or be educated and be able to implement a lot of the research and policies that we have and drive it into practical, like with the Royal Darwin Hospital. You know, there's a number of policies that we have. Are they implemented? No. You know, how does research translate to policy? Then how does policy translate to practice? You know, these are the things that we really need to work on. We need to look at, you know, how do we communicate effectively? You know, I was talking about communication. How do you communicate effectively with your patients? We talk about English. You know, we talk about literacy and numeracy. Many of these communities, it's not, they don't understand literacy and numeracy, they don't understand English. English is not their first or second language. So how do we transform the way that our education system drives and help inform, you know, those communities? One of the things is about bilingual. We need bilingual speakers. We need, like Justin was talking about, the education with the children. We should be able, the children should be able to speak both languages coming through the system, because there are many countries in the world that, you know, that use, you know, the bilingual or, you know, the polylingual, it depends on whatever language you speak. How does that translate through the school? And how do we communicate with both our English speaking colleagues and then our non-English speaking colleagues and also our patients? You know, this is one of the things that I've really learned being in the Northern Territory. I mean, I've known this from back home, but the Northern Territory has really changed my perspective of this. It's about, you know, we need to maintain our language, but how do we as clinicians and how do we as people who are coming through the system use the language? And to be able to communicate effectively to our patients and to whoever we need to be, because we also need English, because English is the preferred language in the Australian health system, but many of our patients don't. And that comes from the multicultural community, and that's also from our Aboriginal community. So when we look at the social determinants of our language is important.
Absolutely agree. No, that's some really good points.
If you've got a medical school, you've got a medical school that is based in the Northern Territory. These are the things that we should be thriving on, because public health, you know, we've got a number of, you know, we should be leading public health in the Northern Territory. We should be leading, you know, the social determinants of health in the Northern Territory.
So I hear you, bro. And you know what? I think that means everyone's got to step up, and, you know, there's an opportunity for us to, you know, listen to the knowledge that from Justin and a leader and yourself and what you're saying. And I suppose this is part of this, what this is about, hearing from you guys that are out on the field, that are on the ground. You know, I think now we're just about out of question time. What I might do is just ask if we've got any questions from the audience as we approach the end of the webinar.
There's just a couple, Richie. Did you want me to read them out?
Yeah, please, Tim.
So a question here. I agree with the panel's recommendation to support students from primary school. However, we have constant concern that the Aboriginal NT primary school students who are identified as the best and brightest are poached by the Southern State private schools and therefore lost to the NT. Do you have any thoughts on that, Sean or Justin, on you know, what we could do to deal with that issue?
Yes, I mean, I agree with that comment, because, you know, the pool is very small and everybody's targeting the one population. However, you know, we need to, and we sort of give priority in many aspects to our Northern Territory residents. And yet, and my addressing it is we probably need to do identify, you know, who are our potential, you know, successors are, you know, and one of the disappointing things, especially within the schools, that even though that we have many of our students who are coming through that English is not their second or third language, they're not entitled to the ELS, you know, English as a second language program. So we could get more, you know, students coming through. It's just the kids probably feel shy because they can't communicate in English, because everybody thinks English is, well, it is actually in Australia, but so the pool could be broadened if, you know, they were able to have ESL training.
Yeah, I feel like if there was, what I noticed a lot down south, particularly in my area, so where I'm from in South Coast New South Wales, the Shoalhaven has, the Shoalhaven region has the sort of highest population of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people in the New South Wales South Coast. But yet we still weren't really getting many students into undergraduate science programs and then onto medical school. And so my take on it all is that there aren't really any clear pathways, or the pathway seems so long or too far that people don't really want to pursue it. So I think that making it very clear to, you know, the average 16-year-old in year 10 that, you know, if you stay in the territory, like, there's ways of getting into university, there's ways of getting into medical school where you are supported, where you can stay locally, where you can be with your family and not leave home. Like, I think having very clear pathways into our, listen to me, I'm saying our program as as if I've been here forever, into the territories program. I think having very clear pathways for young people is important, and making sure that that's well known, and having proactive people in administrative jobs like career advisors, academic advisors, community engagement people. Like, we know all these people exist. It's about making sure that they're proactive and in engaging these young people. So rather than sending them off to or feeling as though that education's better down south.
Great answers from you both. Now, I think there's just time for one more question. Although I should say the comments just come in saying, and yes, Justin, we would like you to stay forever.
Unfortunately, I know. Like, unfortunately, I'm moving on next year, which is sad. But yeah, I have grand plans of coming back. That's for sure.
Excellent. So probably just what time for one last question before Richie wraps up. Yes, Richie.
I've actually been asked. I've received a text. Did he mention his auntie and uncle Nari and Alex Brown, who both worked in the Northern Territory?
Yeah, so that's who I referred to earlier, of my distant cousins. So yeah, Nari and Alex Brown. Yeah, so they're distant relatives of mine from down South Coast. Our mob's from a little community called Wreck Bay Village. And yeah, Nari was the first Aboriginal doctor in New South Wales. And then a couple of years after she went through Newcastle medical program, Alex went through. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. That answers that question.
Mm.
And thank you for sending in your questions to everyone that's participating. It's now time for us to wrap up. I'd like to thank the panelists for the insights they've shared with us today, and would like to encourage you all to keep the conversation going. It's been really interesting to hear about the importance of communication, genuine and deep understanding of Aboriginal culture. Tim and I will do, if there's any more questions, me and Tim can address them. And I'd like to encourage you all to come back next week when we tackle another really important topic in a webinar on your future in Indigenous health, and that'll be here at 12 o'clock on 8th of September. Thank you very much for everyone for participating, and Justin and Sean and Jonathan, thank you for joining us online, Tim and Amanda for helping us. And that was today's session on the search for the top ends doc. Great answers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ant. Thank you.
Thanks.